context, Iran initially was an active and constructive participant in the CTBT negotiations in the 1990s. And the foreign minister at the time, Velayati, even put forward quite a comprehensive draft text that helped bridge a lot of the differences that were present at key junctures during the talks. And in '96, Iran was one of the original signatories to the treaty, but as we know, Iran hasn't ratified it. Iran has a number of facilities in its territory, 2 facilities that have been installed, 3 that are planned, and 1 that's already been certified. It's just not yet been connected to the International Data Center, as far as I understand. So Iran should ratify the CTBT. That is certainly my perspective. Iran doesn't want to be, in fact, it's eager not to be a second North Korea. Ratification would help reduce concerns about Tehran's nuclear intentions. It would be a good confidence-building measures that would help the talks move forward. It would make it more difficult for Iran to build a sophisticated nuclear arsenal, of course, and it would boost Iran's credentials in the handling of its nuclear dossier. So it would only make sense for Iran to ratify. In addition to that, in terms of its internal political dynamics, it would help reinforce the credibility of Ayatollah Khamenei's fatwa against nuclear weapons, and is in line with the idea that nuclear weapons are un-Islamic, which is how it's been presented to the Iranian population and how they've been able to drum up support for a civilian nuclear program. Continued failure to ratify the CTBT would raise further questions about Iran's intent. It would raise questions about the sensitive nature of its activities, and especially if we end up with Israeli and US ratification at some point. Now, why haven't they ratified it? Well, 3 main reasons: the context, the history, and internal politics. There are 2 main reasons that we could think of why any state wouldn't want to ratify the CTBT. The first is because they're planning on testing a device. In Iran's case, I think that's unlikely. That is, it's not my view that they're planning on testing something anytime soon. And secondly, because they just don't want somebody else to tell them what to do. In Iran's case, that's definitely the reason. Given the ongoing nuclear issue, Iran is reluctant to commit to yet another international agreement, especially given how it's been treated in the past regarding its other obligations to international treaties. They feel that even if they do commit, it wouldn't necessarily solve or improve anything, particularly given the nuclear negotiations. In terms of that, and that speaks a little bit to the context, and in terms of the history, while everybody knows that Iran's had a bit of a dubious history when it comes to its relations with the rest of the international community, and it's one of Iran's favorite excuses to turn around and say, yes, but we've been duped in the past, and so I'm sure this treaty will be used against us at some point in the future. The main barrier, though, is a political one. It's internal politics. Like many other issues, and like the nuclear issue itself, in fact, it's a function of internal politicking in Iran. The Iranian political scene is very complicated. It's divided into factions who are constantly fighting one another, and various issues are hijacked at different times and used against their opponents. And this would be no different to any other issue. So ratification would be a hard sell at home. In order to ratify an international treaty, you need the Majlis, or the Iranian parliament, to agree to it, and the current political climate just wouldn't allow this to happen, certainly not before there is a final deal on the nuclear issue. In addition, to be honest, the CTBT is not very well known in Iran. There is absolutely no debate about it, and I wouldn't be surprised if half the parliamentarians in the Majlis turned around and said, "Wait, the what?" And it certainly isn't a priority. Iran's only priority right now, particularly the new administration, is to come to a final nuclear deal. And that is the only thing they have a mandate to agree on, and that's the only thing that they're going to be working on until there is a final deal. And so there would be hardline opposition to anything that's not directly related to the nuclear issue. Finally, as some of the other states on this panel would probably put forward as an argument, is that it would be seen as yet another way for the international community to limit national sovereignty. The excuses that the Iranians use are, much like other states, are, Israel and US failure to ratify the CTBT, so it's similar to Egypt's policy of linkage with other international agreements. A lot of Iranian officials, much like Israeli officials actually, complain that by banning only nuclear explosions, the treaty fails to achieve comprehensive nuclear disarmament. And again, similar to Israeli statements, the Iranian officials have spoken, or those who know about the CTBT certainly, have spoken about the prospects for misuse of these facilities and stations within Iran. Many in the region say that the system is not precise enough yet to distinguish between smaller countries' territories, but this obviously doesn't apply to Iran because it's quite a big country. So what could Iran do today? As a first step, Iran could begin to transmit data from its certified monitoring station by connecting it to the International Data Center. It's a pretty simple step. It could also continue with the installation and certification of further stations. In terms of getting ratification to go through, one possibility that hasn't been spoken about much is to do something similar to what is being discussed at the moment with regards to the implementation of the additional protocol in Iran. That means implementing the basic obligations of the CTBT without actually calling it as such. That wouldn't require Majlis ratification, which is very important because it's more likely to go through. And it would ensure that the basic provisions of the treaty are being implemented in Iran. Of course, another barrier, something that would be good to get over first, would be to have a nuclear deal, a final nuclear deal, so that that is taken off the table, and then other issues can be discussed. And finally, as with other states, ratification by other states would put pressure on Tehran to also follow suit. Thank you.